All right, let's do it. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? It is the 22nd of June, 2024. My name is Luke Thomas. This is going to be my official UFC Saudi Arabia post-fight show. Thank you for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. So, a couple of housekeeping notes. We're going to get to the results, the analysis, your questions answered, the whole bit. Obviously, if you don't want spoilers, now's a great time to go. If you want to get a question in, we'll go for a little while, and then at the end, we'll do a Q&A period. Drop something in the super chat, and we'll get to all those questions at the end. Or you can just sit here and watch and enjoy, and you don't have to do all that. But if you want to, that's certainly an available option, and I would appreciate it. Either way, thank you for being here. Let's have a lot of fun. Let's get this party started. And without further ado, let's go. All right. UFC Fight Night. You can call it UFC Fight Night Whittaker Aliskerov, UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia, UFC whatever you want. UFC Riyadh. I saw people calling it. You can call it whatever you want. Before we get to all of these results, I'm going to bring this up basically one time and then not again so that we can really get to the sports analysis of it. There is a sports washing conversation to be had. We've had it a million times. I'm really not going to rehash it. I just want to say a couple of things. One, it was kind of interesting. There were no women on the broadcast. Really, it appeared to be almost no women at all in attendance, which is kind of noteworthy. Second of all, did you guys notice there was no gambling sponsor that I saw? There was no liquor sponsor. There was no Bud Light. There was none of that. And definitely no condom sponsor. They were not going to sponsor your Jimmy getting wrapped up. Let me tell you that. So I don't really care about that one way or the other, but just sort of one of the differences there. And then the last thing I'd say is this aired on ABC. This was one of those kinds of events. You get to decide however you want to feel about the UFC doing business in Saudi Arabia. I don't think most MMA fans, I don't think, care at all. We're just going to bring it up one time, just so everyone understands what the score is. You can like this or you can hate this, or you can just not care at all. I leave it up to you. But just always understand that any of these things you see, they are commercials for Saudi Arabia, right? So just keep that in mind. Decide how you feel about that on your own. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to some of the results from the fights themselves, which I thought were either really good or just kind of really ho-hum. Really not a lot of differences. It wasn't a huge range. It was either hot or cold, basically, is kind of the point I want to make. But let's start with that main event if we can. The main event, not a long one. Robert Whittaker getting the job done at 149 of round number 1 via KO over Ikram Aliskerov. Now, we know the story. Aliskerov was supposed to fight last weekend. He had a bout with Antonio Trocoli that was set up. It fell through. He was also, or Trocoli, excuse me, who was also on this card tonight. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It fell through because Khamzat Chimaev wasn't available, and so Robert Whittaker needed a dance partner. Who did they come up with? They've got Aliskerov. He was kind of interesting because he'd obviously fought Khamzat before, stuffed all of his takedowns, got knocked out, but that was when Khamzat was really one of these boogeymen of international class MMA pre-UFC. And the guy had, I think, nothing but 3 first-round finishes, one on the Contender Series and then 2 in the UFC proper. One again, I think the last one was against Varley Alves. The point I wanted to make was he looked like a really good prospect. I still think he actually is a very good prospect, to be quite honest with you. However, this was a huge assignment. You could believe that if Aliskerov was able to get a takedown, that maybe he could do something interesting with it. Robert Whittaker was ready to hear fucking none of that at all. What a performance by him, dude. Aliskerov really had a lot to work with here. He came into this one unranked, not ranked inside the top 15. Robert Whittaker, I believe, I'll double check this, but I believe is currently sitting at 3, certainly inside that top 3 space. Okay. He had everything to lose here. I mean, if you're Bobby Knuckles and you lose at all, it probably means curtains for your title hopes. If you lose to somebody who is unranked, it would be devastating for your ranking position, for your standing in the division, what the UFC wants to do with you. It would be absolutely a monster problem for him if that were to have gone forward in that way. So let's be very clear about this. We talked about this on the live chat on Thursday, folks being like, hey, is he really deserve a title shot? And again, by pure meritocratic norms, no, he doesn't. But we all know what the score is. The score is that the promoter has to put on fights that people want to pay money to see, and there could be all different kinds of variables that they weigh in order to do that. I think with what Whittaker has done here today, which is done the UFC a solid by keeping that main event alive, taking on a short notice opponent with extreme risk, then putting on like an absolute fucking murderous, just ran him over. I mean, let's just call it what it was. He ran Aliskerov over quickly. Took him very little time to diagnose the problem and then act on it. And then on top of it, look at the broader context of what he's been doing on this like comeback trail that he's been on for quite some time. It seems like he just keeps proving there's the champions, former ones and the current one, of which Whittaker is a part of that group, and then there's everybody else. And the difference between them is enormous. There's like middleweights, and then there's the guys who have held the belt, basically. There's really no difference between them. But he might actually end up getting the winner of Izzy DDP, not because beating Aliskerov by itself would be a sufficient basis by which to earn a title shot, but the way in which he did it, the context of doing the company a solid in the way that he did it, and then again the broader realities of everything else. They might do that. They might do DDP Whittaker 2. They might do Whittaker Izzy 3. I mean, we keep talking about Sean Strickland having a claim to the winner here. And again, they might do Whittaker Strickland. They could do Whittaker Strickland. There's a lot of different ways. I'm simply pointing out what he did today. He beat a very good fighter in a risky context and made it look effortless. Made it look like it was nothing. Was not rattled by the risk. Was not rattled by not having, hometown advantage. It wasn't like the Saudi crowds are always weird. Like this one was more filled than some of the Saudi events that we've seen, but it still doesn't quite feel like there's a giant organic fan base. Again, different conversation. But I was amazed. I mean, you knew Whittaker was capable of it, but nevertheless, like we've seen it before, there are some guys who can manage the stress when the lights come on. And then there are guys who come alive when the lights come on, when they actually can only be their best under those circumstances. It feels to me like that's what Whittaker is. So a huge, huge win for him. Not the huge win that can come from beating somebody who is really highly credentialed, and that one will stand the test of time on the resume. Although I do think this one will age well as Aliskerov gets more experience in UFC. But again, the broader context of just running this fucking guy over, running him over. I mean, Lord have mercy. Let's talk about how he did it here a little bit. I want to go back and watch and see some of the details of it if I can. But just based off of memory and watching that final sequence, you could see he does that dip off to the side. He goes jab to the body. And then a lot of times, how did Aliskerov respond on the final sequence with the right hand that hit him? You see him kind of fake like he's going to go that way. And then when it draws out the jab and then the knee, right, because they're trying to greet Whittaker with the knee, he doesn't end up going too far because it's just enough to hand trap, pull the hand down, and then it doesn't matter because it was on the other side, but then throw the right hand over the top and just crushed him for it. You had Aliskerov on skates. He jabs him back, hits him with that same combo or nearly the same kind of combo as he hit Derek Brunson with. He loves that jab to head kick kind of combo, which only partially lands, but then he hits him off at the angle and then fires through the uppercut. Surgical finish. Ridiculous. Dude, he was able to make a reading of what Aliskerov was doing, draw out those weapons within under 2 minutes of the fight, and they basically a minute and a half. Basically within 90 seconds, he had this dude audited. 90 seconds. This is what I mean about these guys wanting let me pull this up for just a second. 1 second. Here we go. And I'm going to fix something right there. Okay. That's what I mean, man, about these guys who are really good, dude. They can diagnose problems very quickly, know what the solution is to get to that, take advantage of that problem, like what gap it creates, and then act on it very, very quickly. Like a lot of fighters can't actually do this. I mean, the good ones can, but a lot of them just kind of like know what the game plan is and then kind of stick to it no matter what, and can't like really fully diagnose how to solve a problem in this way or that particular way or this particular way. And even if they can, it takes them a long time to do it. This guy just made a fucking quick assessment of it. Okay, dip. I'm going to pretend like I'm going. Here it comes the reaction. Bang. Catches him and then just fucking closes the show from there. Dude, levels to this shit. Levels to this shit, dude. Robert Whittaker's level, again, it's just him and anyone else who's won the belt. And then the rest aren't even in the same fucking conversation. The level of skill, the level of smoothness to his game, the integration of offense between faking, feinting, striking, finishing skill, position, everything, all of it working together fluidly. Like the level of difference is vast, super vast. He really has. And when people think about like complete skill sets, they think, can you check the box of every kind of different skill? And certainly that can be valuable, but even then it's kind of like a silly way to think about it because nobody can actually have competency across every single different kind of skill one could have. They have to have like a nice group of it. But the way I tend to think of it more is less about like how many boxes can you check about what things you have and more about how refined is what you have and how well can you take that game and then apply it to a range of different contexts. And on that latter consideration, Whittaker is superb, right? He doesn't do everything. He's got a certain kind of game, but it's smooth. It's refined. Everything works together. All the trains leave the station on time. All the different pieces flow from one end to the other, right? When he's cooking, like as he did today. That's really what you notice. And I kind of want to talk about his journey here a little bit as well, if we can. He's 26-7, just 33 years of age. So he is not out, in all likelihood, not out of his physical prime, although he's certainly going to be entering the back half of it and probably already is in it. So he had the loss to Dricus and the loss to Izzy, and then the other loss to Izzy. And then before that, it was the last one against Wonderboy. So here's his middleweight campaign. I guess Clint Hester is part of it. Maybe Mike Rhodes too. So Mike Rhodes, Clint Hester off The Ultimate Fighter, Brad Tavares, Uriah Hall, Rafael Natal, Derek Brunson, Jacare, Yoel twice. Then he loses to Izzy, Darren Till, Jared Cannonier, Kelvin Gastelum. That when that win still reasonably good. Loses a very close fight to Izzy. Comes back and beats Marvin Vettori. And Vettori was hanging on for dear life in this one. Credit to Dricus. Dricus put his lights out. Then he comes back and beats now Bohashinia and Aliskerov here. It's not like those last two wins are so great in name that they can thrust him to the front of the line, but you just have to look around and ask, does it make sense to do a Robert Whittaker-Sean Strickland fight? It could. It could. It absolutely could. But I could also see a big opportunity in, as I mentioned, Whittaker DDP 2 and now Whittaker Izzy 3 if it ends up getting to that kind of a level. So we'll have to see what they do with that fight. If maybe they'll have to run that one back for whatever reason, and maybe it'll just be the case that Whittaker will have to fight Strickland. That's a hell of a fight too. Whittaker and Strickland, a guy who's got smooth, very capable, tricky offense against a guy who's got a really strong defensive shell, essentially defensive system. I guess is maybe a better way to put it. It's not because it's not quite all shoulder rolling. It's a lot of parrying. It's a lot of checking. But anyway, you get the idea. Just making it look effortless, making it look like it's absolutely nothing. There's really nothing left for him to do even in this weight class anymore, except to fight for a title. I mean, obviously, he'll stay in it as long as he wants, and he'll get big fights as long as he can remain relevant. But like, you watch a fight like this, and you just realize a fighter that good, especially in this kind of division, which is not one of the stronger divisions overall. Obviously, the guys at the top are really, really good, but overall, middleweight is not the strongest division UFC has. A guy like Whittaker, when you look at how advanced and thorough and, again, smooth and connected his entire game is, you realize it's like, dude, he's graduated past everybody else that's not a former champ, basically. Like, they can't do anything to him. They can't. There's. I mean, let's pull up the rankings here if we can for just a second. Let me pull up these rankings. All right, for 185, Sean Strickland's your number one contender. Izzy's at 2. I was right. Whittaker's at 3. Imavov is sitting at 4. Cannonier, who we already beat, is at 5. Vettori, who we already beat, is at 6. Brendan Allen, they haven't fought. So I'm, down the line, potentially that could be interesting, but it's not really relevant right now. Costa, who he just beat, is sitting at 8. Hermanson, they didn't fight. And then the lead is at 10. He's obviously got business with Anthony Smith. Khamzat is sitting back there at 11. Holy fuck. We'll talk about him in just a second. And then everyone else, it's not really relevant. Like, there's just nothing. He's beaten the game, but for those other guys. That's it. That's the only hill that's left to conquer. So I would not be in any way upset if they make a Sean Strickland fight. And I don't know what their plans are. And again, how it all could play out in that main event for UFC 305 between Izzy and DDP. But if you were Whittaker, you knew you had the wind at your back because you were getting a guy who didn't have the same kind of experience. And you had to feel good that you stayed on, you didn't flinch. You took on a tough assignment and a risky assignment that had to feel good. And then to go and just remind everyone, don't fuck with me, right? Don't fuck with me. Like, you're not on this level. To do it in such a thorough, quick, brutal way, man, wow, what an advertisement for a title shot is really how I feel about that. What an advertisement for it. And if you're the UFC, you have to know you can book them however you want. But it seems pretty clear to me, you give him anybody that's not aforementioned, as we talked about, he's going to beat him. He's just got too much going for him. Too much. The experience is too good. The will to compete is still there. The smoothness and the integration of a really developed, smart game, it's all there as well. And I got to tell you, like, I don't know where your appetite is on this one. I kind of feel like if he did fight, like, what would you rather see him do after this? Would you rather see Izzy 3? Obviously, the answer is going to be who wins in that main event at 305. But what I'm saying is, who would you want to win in that fight to get the best kind of Whittaker fight? Do you want to see him triumph over Izzy despite losing twice, never being finished? Well, he got finished the first time, but not the last time. The last time was Nick and Tuck. Obviously, he got finished the first time. Or do you want to see him go against DDP after DDP beats Izzy and see if he can't get that one back against a really physical guy, which at the time, it shouldn't be now, but at the time, that was a bit of a surprising win because we all thought, at least I thought anyway, that Whittaker's developed game would be enough to handle like a bruiser in the way that DDP is. Obviously, it was not on that day. So that would be an interesting, either one of those. My personal preference would be to get the third Izzy fight. If obviously it's assuming Izzy wins, but I'd almost rather see that one because I don't know if the fight would be as good. I actually feel like the DDP fight would be a little bit more blood and guts, but the stakes of that one would be fucking enormous, like really, really, really enormous. For him to claw one back against Izzy would be a dramatic thing if he could end up doing it. So it's hard to know what to say about this fight beyond it. Whittaker does what Whittaker does. He took his time. He used great setups. He saw exactly where he got reactions out of the guy that he wanted to get reactions out of. I appreciate that Aliskerov, also made adjustments on the fly in terms of he had a fight last week and he had to cut weight twice and all that shit. That couldn't have helped. But he would, like, based on what you saw today, it's a virtual guarantee he would have lost if they had fought 100 times. Can't say that. We don't really know. Maybe if there was a takedown involved, you'd feel a little bit differently. But on the feet, there's not a comparison between them. No, there's not a comparison. Much, much, much better guy in Robert Whittaker. So you got to feel, if you're a Robert Whittaker fan, you got to feel great, man. When these guys sometimes lose in the way that they have, I've seen it before. Like, when Rich Franklin lost to Anderson Silva, it was so thorough. You were like, okay, I know we can get another title shot, but he's got some work to do. And then the second time they fought, you were like, oh, right, there's been no meaningful improvement. He's fucking stuck. As long as Silva's here, he's not going to do shit. And he beat most other guys in that weight class and 205. But the point being was the second time they met, you were like, oh, right, like Silva's he's just too much better than Rich. Rich will never make up this gap. But that's not what happened against Izzy, right? First time he gets finished. Second time, it was super close. I mean, obviously Izzy won, and I thought he did, but that is one you could see either way. Like, so look at the difference. The difference in the first and the second one was dramatic. Now, he still lost, but pretty significant improvement. He has not lost any of that will to compete. And I think, what is Izzy, 34? I have to go look and see Drickus. I think Drickus is like 32. He has not lost that thirst to be champion or to try to do his best or to like he has not been deterred by any of these fairly significant losses. In certain cases, big losses. He has not been deterred. He has not had the will to compete taken out of him. So, I mean, the Robert Whittaker middleweight brand, you can't say it's as hot as it's ever been. He's not the champion, but that fucking guy has kept his brand super relevant at middleweight while not being a champion despite setbacks. Incredible. Absolutely incredible what he's got. He has earned a huge fight. I mean, again, I'll wrap it up on this because I'm repeating myself. I wouldn't mind a Sean Strickland fight. I really wouldn't. But I feel like he should get the winner of the title fight at 305. I really do. And you can say, well, shouldn't Sean Strickland get that? Yeah, to an extent. I mean, he's got a good case too. But I don't know. I kind of feel like Whittaker could make the fights more interesting. I'm not convinced Sean. I saw an improvement in Strickland's last game or last fight. I saw an improvement trying to up the amount of offense. It wasn't a ton, but I definitely recognize that he's clearly adding more to it. And I respect that. But it just feels like there's still a limit to that right now. It hasn't really turned a corner with it. Whereas I feel like with Whittaker, more pieces are finished and polished and put together that could deliver just more interesting action. That's a personal preference. Yours may be different, but that's where I'm at on it. Normally I go to the stats on these fights, but I can't imagine there's going to be jack shit to look at considering that was not long. Let's take a look here very quickly if I can. Aliskerov landed here. Let me pull this up so I can show it to you guys. Let's take a look here if I can. All right, let's paste and go. I'm going to put that there. Let's see. Let me add and show this to you if I can. So, all right. Window. Let's look at this one. Okay. So here, let's look at it this way. All right. There's not a whole lot to show about this. So here is obviously Whittaker on top. He gets credited with the one knockdown, 14-21. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. 2/3 of them significant strikes. They gave him 3 seconds of control time, I guess, for like that version of Neon Belly or whatever he had from there. Just 5 for Aliskerov. And he's, by the way, look at these. Targeted 12 of 19 to the head, 2 of 2 of the leg, nothing to the body, but he kind of faked like he was going low, right? And then they're all at distance for the most part. And then 2 on the ground there as well. Aliskerov, 3 of 10 to the head, 1 of 4 to the targeting to the body, and then 1 of 1 targeting to the leg. Interesting. Yeah, and then you hear all head hunting, big time. Head hunting. But he dips on that jab, so like that they think that you can get him that way, right? When he lowers his level, dipping on the jab. You'll see him do it, right? He doesn't stand like you just get off the side. He really kind of goes over to that side. And so that's why you saw Aliskerov trying to greet him with that knee. But he got fucking worked for it. Pretty incredible. Hell of a job by Robert Whittaker. All right. So that's the main event. If you have any questions, put them in the super chat. We'll get to them at the end. Oh, a word on Khamzat Chimaev, if I may. Had to be devastating not to be here tonight. Had to be really terrible for him. I do feel for him in that regard. I would not wish illness, whatever the nature of it is, on him or anyone. A massive opportunity lost, right? Again, it's a question about how much Whittaker will get from this. But if Khamzat had gotten his hand raised tonight, if Khamzat had done to Whittaker what Whittaker did to Aliskerov, I mean, you can't really say a star is born because a star has already been born, but you would say a contender's been born, like a title like that. He probably would have leapt. Dude, if Khamzat Chimaev had done tonight, that's, of course, a huge thing. And I'm not comparing the two because obviously beating a ranked person when you're unranked is much bigger than the opposite. But I'm just saying, if Whittaker had been put out tonight by Khamzat Chimaev, Chimaev would have gotten the winner of UFC 305, no questions asked. You know it, I know it. We all know it. He would have 100% been the guy who would have inherited the title fight, the title winner. They would have flown him down to Australia, assuming he can get into the country. And they would have done that. And there's just no question that fight would have been big. It would have been, huge. And of course, you can't write out that Chimaev can't come back and make an opportunity. We don't really know what the prognosis of his long-term health is, but you want to talk about an opportunity cost or at a bare minimum, just what's being lost here tonight for him. Enormous amount of career momentum, gigantic amount. Not the kind that he can't make up, but you just won't get many of these in your career. You don't get an infinite amount of opportunities to headline a card that is important to the company against someone who is fully credentialed. I mean, at this point, I've said it before, like literally what else could Whittaker do except win a title at middleweight? Fully credentialed. He already won it. I mean, recapture it. And if you're Khamzat, if you had gotten a win over that guy, it would have been transformational for your career. So there's rampant speculation about what he could be. Did COVID end up fucking him up long term? We don't know. Is it something else that has nothing to do with it? He's got some other kind of illness. Could be. I don't know. Everyone's going to speculate. Some of these inferences seem a little bit more valuable than others. But dude, if you're 27 and you miss out on something like this, it's no big deal. And even if you're 30 and you miss out on it, it's certainly not fatal. But the window is closing on him. Not completely. There's still time, but it is closing. There are multiple valuable opportunities out now that have been lost due to illness, injury, visa issues, you name it. All of these things have dramatically sunk his stock. And you're going to need something equally powerful to reboost it to get back just to really where he was, much less forward progress. So I guess we'll have to see what happens to him. All right, let's talk about this co-main event, shall we? A fun one here. BC loves this guy. Alexander Volkov defeating Sergei Pavlovich. How long ago was it when Volkov lost to Vitaly Minikov? All the way back. Yeah, I remember that fight in 2013. Dude, I remember this fight very clearly. I don't know if it's on the internet or not. So I'm saying I remember very clearly. I don't, but I remember watching it very clearly. And I remember Minikov, I believe, was able to out-wrestle him basically no problem. And I was thinking to myself, dude, he's just too big. He's too bottom-heavy, Volkov. Footwork's really not going to be there. I mean, obviously, he's big, and if he uses that, he'll have some good wins, but he's really pretty limited. And he has definitely done better than that, what I thought was possible 11 years ago. Now, I'm not with BC that I feel like I can see a guy who can win a title. Obviously, in heavyweight, any guy can land a punch, and anything is possible in that sense. But we saw what happened against Tom Aspinall. He got run over pretty quickly. I didn't see anything here tonight that told me that really was something I had to reconsider. I don't know if you guys did either. I doubt it. However, what I will say is here's a guy who has really made his game efficient and connected. He starts out in orthodox, and he then moves back and forth between orthodox and southpaw. And like really halfway through the first round, maybe like 3 minutes in, he basically, for the most part, settles on southpaw, and it works out really well. He's able to keep Pavlovich at distance the whole time. His jab was working for him with that right hand, right? And he could marry it with his kicking game. So he's using lateral movement the entire time. He's using that lead hand control to establish distance. Pavlovich, not really the kind of guy who's going to pick up a single leg attack. And when he tried to enter or wherever, if he stood still and got feinted, he'd get kicked to the body. Those were vicious from him. Or you would see him, you could see him stomp out the front leg. He would kick it and then exit out, or he'd go back to the rear leg and then inside kick and get underneath the hook from Pavlovich. But he had this kicking game that would disrupt the stance, the balance, the rhythm, the timing of Pavlovich. He had a jab game that complemented it as well, or he could put the two together, not necessarily all the time, but he could also put them together as well. The body kicks were vicious. The left straights were vicious at times, especially when he was moving into his left. And now Pavlovich is following him. There was one in the third round that landed just like that. Dude, that is a very, very well executed game plan from a tall fighter, fighting tall, making a quick, small adjustment. I wrote that like the fight was different after that. Not that there was like, not that Volkov was getting his ass kicked and they switched stances and all of a sudden that was not the case. I don't mean it that way in particular. But what I am saying is he started off orthodox, made the adjustment to go southpaw, and I think realized, oh, I really like how this feels against this guy, and then ended up just staying there. So once he made that adjustment, he really never looked back. Pavlovich, at times, you could see when he could get Volkov closer to the fence, he could find a home for his own backhand, but it really was he was difficult. He throws a lot of looping shots, so you could see a bunch whip around the arms of Volkov. They couldn't quite get through. So defensively strong for the most part, kept good bearing even when he did get tagged. Great lateral movement. Excellent read to stay in southpaw and marry the jab with the low kick with the sort of oblique kick kind of thing that he was doing as well. Or he had a couple of inside crescent kicks. Did you see that? I think he had one at the end of the second round where like that inside crescent kick, the way he throws it like that. So there was one there. Then on top of that, he had the body kicks from the rear leg. Dude, that was a great performance by him. Really, really strong. It's, again, not the kind for me that really says that, hey, you know, I would really put my money on him against Tom Aspinall in a future contest or John Jones. I don't feel that way. That doesn't mean I'm right, but that's just how I feel. But I can certainly respect how well executed that was in the end. Also for Pavlovich, a really tough 2-fight stretch. He gets just fucking flatlined basically by Tom Aspinall. Comes in here and is kind of expected to be this dominant power puncher, and again gets some of that stuff off. There's a little bit to it, but really can't get consistent offense. Had a hard time closing the distance. A lot of it was blocked, and then his face was a fucking crimson mask by the time that card was over. Just looked like, you know, I don't want to make the visual comparison, but you get the idea. It looked terrible. It looked absolutely terrible. I want to see some of the stats on this one if I can here very quickly. Oops. Let me go forward. Let's look at some of the numbers on this one. Oh my God, Jesus, look at some of this stuff. Here, hold on. Take a look at this. I mean, Sergei Pavlovich, 46 strikes of 134. Volkov had almost double that with 83 of 159, 52% of which were significant strikes. That's insane. Almost a 2-to-1 difference there. I want to see the difference round by round. Yeah, 26 to 15, more than doubled in round 2, and then nearly doubled again in round number 3. Great job by him. There's a failed takedown by Pavlovich in round 3. Targeting is the one that's kind of interesting to me. Yeah, the dude headhunts. He has, look at this. Pavlovich has barely any body work and then couldn't land to the head. He didn't mix it up. I do feel like, you know, people keep talking about, oh, his game is boxing based. It is boxing based, but even within the boxing base, it's narrow in its application. It's not to say that you can't find winning performances with this kind of distribution, but if you're going through the course of a 3-round fight, and even through the second, before that, even by the middle of the fight, so by the 7.5 minute, if you're boxing and you're having a hard time closing the distance and you're having a hard time reaching the head on an opponent who's using good lateral movement and you're not going to the body, again, easier said than done, but you're not addressing that to bring the hands down, you're not making them really transfer their defense, you're going to have limited results. This is a clear expression of that, if ever there was one. And then, of course, look at Volkov really mixing it up. Look at how much we opened talking about how much he did to disrupt the balance, disrupt the stance, disrupt the base, essentially, of Pavlovich with that array of kicking both inside and outside and even really to the front of it in combination with the jab, but not necessarily always. Look at that. Almost the same amount to the head. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what got through to the head was there much more effective because Pavlovich had a lot more to consider in terms of what he was going to do to use his defense. All kinds, and then he couldn't even get stuff going because he's getting teeped to the chest and he has to back up off the crescent kick and he's getting, you know, flushed, hit to the ribs on the other side. Did much more to holster some of the punches off the backhand, right? That's why when you go to the body is that they land a lot. And obviously in open stance, if I go to the body with the backhand, you have to keep your backhand there. So that's going to keep that power hand holstered the whole time. So he did a good job of not even letting Pavlovich get to a lot of the shots he wanted by making him defense-oriented first as he moved around and then fired shots to the body. Great, just a great performance by him. And for Volkov to have this kind of a resume now at this point, where he's riding a win streak since losing to Tom Aspinall, he finished Rosenstrike, he finished Romanov, he finished Tuivasa, and then thoroughly just beat Sergei Pavlovich. I didn't think Pavlovich won a single round. I guess one of them, the judges had it 29-28, but I didn't think it was that close. Pretty interesting. All right. Back to the rest of that card, if we can. Kelvin Gastelum defeats Daniel Rodriguez. I don't know how I feel about this one. It's not that Kelvin Gastelum fought poorly. I don't think he did. There were some nice combinations from Daniel Rodriguez, including going over the top and then marrying that with then coming underneath, right? You saw some of those bop, bop kind of shots, which was interesting. That was some good work, but Gastelum's got a hell of a chin. He did have good cardio. I'll come back to that. I'm just saying, did he have good cardio or did he not? Yes, he did. He was clearly faster than D-Rod. Now, we know that Gastelum has fast hands basically no matter what, but he was clearly faster. So I appreciate that he was able to execute reasonably well, got the takedown at the end, had some good riding time, right? Was decent ground and pound to accompany it. But he missed weight horribly. And D-Rod obviously was able to weigh in without having to cut a bunch of weight, but the camp probably came with an enormous amount of sacrifices that couldn't have prepared him well, especially I think D-Rod's like 36, 37. So you're just looking at a scenario there where it's insanely unfair to Daniel Rodriguez. And I know he accepted it, but like financially, he probably doesn't have a lot of wiggle room to be like, yeah, I'm just going to not fight Kelvin Gastelum on a big card at age 37 with minimal amount of time left, probably in the professional ranks, or at least the high level professional ranks. So he has to take this fight. He performs. I thought he won at least one of those rounds. I did not think it was 30-27 Gastelum, but I do think 2 rounds is probably fair. Certainly the third. However, it's like, dude, how many fucking times is he or really anybody else going to be allowed to miss weight and then they're not carry really any penalization into the fight itself? And the Grabaka Hitman Caposa was talking about this on Twitter quite rightly. There's Japanese organizations that do this, and Brazilian ones too. Jungle Fight in Brazil does this, where if you miss weight, not only is there some kind of financial penalty ahead of the fight, but then you carry into the fight a deducted point for the first round, or overall score anyway. You lose that. But we don't do that with the unified rules. I think constantly we should. And there's certain organizations where if you miss weight in the way that he did, where they had to put that fucking thing in a brand new weight class, right? 15 pounds up. It was like, oh, we're going to hit it at a 175 catch weight. No, dude. That motherfucker was at 185. The best you can hope for is to win, and they'll just call it a no contest. Like you're not even eligible to win. And I realize this brings up a broader debate about show money, win money, who's owed what, and the rules. It's more than simply how you deal with Kelvin Gastelum in this one particular instance, but we definitely don't do a great job of making these situations fair. That situation was inherently unfair to Daniel Rodriguez, and I recognize that he gets some financial compensation from Gastelum on the front end, but it's not enough. You can just do this all the time. And it looked to me like Gastelum was kind of begging to keep his job, understandably, after missing weight so bad, and then doing a taco eating thing on his YouTube channel, just really not exercising great judgment from what I can tell. And there's the other point too. It's where like, dude, did Gastelum fight poorly tonight? No, he didn't. I did not think that he fought poorly. Is anybody looking at this and thinking to themselves, that's a title contender in either weight class? Dude, the fight before this, Sean Brady ran over him. Like, it's a decent addition to the roster. It's not a super critical one to the roster. And then on top of it, there's this issue of like weight missing that doesn't ever seem to get resolved. Yeah, I'd be begging for my job too if that was the position that I was holding and I really needed that job. Like they don't need you. Like this is not somebody who you can clearly tell is destined for a title shot. It's pretty clear he's not, right? And there's like basic professionalism issues in play. Wow, man. That's brazen. Super brazen. They're not going to keep you with shit like that. They're just, they might now because, he did fight ably and he was very apologetic afterwards, but I am not one of these kinds of people who like, oh, so-and-so's a weight bully. You know what I mean? That's not really, I'm not really that guy. I think most people use that term weight bully far too cavalierly to describe people who are maybe cutting a lot of weight, but the trade-off between what they're getting and what advantage they're claiming can be really hard to detect, and certainly not really enough to be credibly called a weight bully. And I'm not even saying necessarily that's the case with Gastelum, but I am saying, like, go through his record. I think he's got the one loss one time he missed weight, but in general, he comes out on the winning end of these things. You're putting your opponents in that kind of a disadvantage this many times. I don't even know what to say. And like, the rules of MMA are still so fucked up and bad. Well, let's get to it. I want to talk about this one because it's related to this one, which is the Shara Magomedov and Antonio Trocoli fight. I forget which round it was. Was it the third round or maybe the second round, where Magomedov has one of the most blatant fence grabs you will ever fucking see in your professional MMA watching life. And Mark Goddard, and I know everyone does this because they want to avoid like blowback. I don't really care, but I'm saying it because I've actually talked with Mark Goddard offline many times and found him to be a very, very nice guy who I do think cares about doing the job well. I genuinely believe that. But none of us are perfect, and that was a really bad call. Really bad. How the fuck do you not take a point for something like that? And then folks say, well, what's the difference if it takes a point? Magomedov was certainly better on the feet the whole time. Yeah, Trocoli looked like, this was last minute for him. I realized he had another fight lined up, but given the challenges, just unprepared for that particular challenge, right? Last minute in that sense. I get that. I'm not, in all likelihood, yeah, Magomedov would have won, but you don't know that. Like, fights can change. These incentive structures can do all kinds of things to fighters' minds. We cannot declare what that would be. More to the point, if he had also started them on the ground, which they also should have done, what would that do to the round? What would that do to the fight? Like, that could have changed it dramatically. One never knows. Again, in all likelihood, Magomedov still wins, but we're not even going to bother to enforce the rules and try and level this playing field. I mean, people lecture me all the time about my views on PDs. First of all, they get them wrong all the time, but they lecture me about the creating a level playing field. Dude, what about that shit is a level playing field where someone is visibly grabbing the fence to the point that when they're being dragged away, it actually convexes the cave. It convexes the panel of the octagon as they pull it with them. I mean, the only thing that would be left is for like the Incredible Hulk to just rip the motherfucker off the octagon floor, like gripping onto that thing for dear life, dude. That is so. If you can't enforce that, then there's no point enforcing it at all. If something like that, it's like there's a law against murder, and then someone goes and sets your family on fire in front of you, and you're like, well, police, you got to do something about this. Like, well, it's a borderline case. Like, dude, if you can't even enforce that, then there is no rule against it. I even tweeted, I was like, grabbing the fence in MMA is legal. Guy, it's the most egregious fucking kind, where they pull the panel of the octagon inside their grip with them as they get pulled away. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Oh, my wife is texting me. Let me see. All right. The fuck is that, fellas? What the fuck is that? What is that? I couldn't believe that. And, listen, Shara Magomedov obviously has some skill standing. He's got a dynamic striking game generally. He has a very dynamic kicking game. But his takedown defense it's better than rudimentary, but not much better. And it's certainly not impressive, the grappling side of his game. And certainly the takedown defense portion of it. Like, we need to slow the roll on him significantly. And this is, people can say what they want about like, oh, Izzy doesn't have great wrestling, great takedown defense. Yeah, that's true. But it's a lot better than his. It's a lot better than his. Big, basic, key rule. It's one thing to stop the takedown along the fence. And if you've heard me say this before, this is why I repeat it, because this is a great version. This is a great example. It's one thing to stop the takedown, which he can do. It's another thing to create separation off the fence. And he can't do that almost at all. If he gets a frame on the inside, almost closer to like a clinch, he can do it. Or he can sometimes off the underhook, he can do it. But without that, it's not possible. He is glued to that fucking thing. He is glued to it. So I can appreciate what he brings in differentiation in the stand-up. I really can. I'm not saying, oh, he's some kind of fraud. That's really not my point. But there's a lot of hype on him that I think is related to the fact that he comes from, he's got a crazy look. And obviously, again, he does have a dangerous, really interesting kicking game. That is true. You saw evidence of that in this fight. But he had a hard time against for the most part, through the second half of that fight, really through the 2 second rounds, a stationary opponent who was there to be hit. He had a hard time getting his head off to avoid some of the jabbing and just this kind of linear punching of Trocoli. He had a lot of whipping stuff. He got backed up a little bit too easily. He was kind of waiting for Trocoli to go, but he couldn't bait it out at times. And then he put up a knee shield on the takedown and then couldn't do anything else, had no separation, just kind of held position. Yeah, we should probably slow the hype on that a little bit. Right? I saw Bo Nickel being like, give me Bullet. I'd be cool with that. But like the Bullet Magomedov stuff, an interesting, fun, and I would still say promising prospect. Long way to go. How old is he? He currently sits at, let's see. He sits at 30. So he's got some time. Not a whole lot, but he's got some time. But not the finish itself was really nice. The finish was great. I really like how he set that all up. That was good. That reactive knee from him level changing, firing it up, that was great. I really appreciated that from him. And everything else was fine. But I didn't see the kind of performance where you're like, oh, that guy's the next big thing in the sport. I did not see that. And I'm pretty sure you guys didn't see that either. Right. All right. Opening that main card, Volkan Oezdemir. Dude, he looked awesome against Johnny Walker. He beats him at 228 of round number 1. By the way, in the previous one, Magomedov and Trocoli, it was 227 of round 3. But okay, in Oezdemir versus Walker, 228 of round 1. Guy took his time, set up the finish. Basically, did you guys notice he would pre-slip to the left, or he would at least fake like he was going to pre-slip to the left, and it looked like he was going to go low, and then he would come, or it looked like he was actually going to come high with the overhand, and then he would whip around with the left hook, and he got Walker. Walker was able to quite literally walk out of the way of it, but then he got back to the fence, and then he just gets tall, and he got hit maybe 45 seconds to a minute before the final sequence got going, and then you could see he had a hard time understanding what was coming from his right side, but from the left side of Oezdemir. Oezdemir brilliantly set it up, rocked him, took his time, and then finished him off in the process. By the way, Oezdemir, credit where credit is due. No time is 34 years old, which is old-ish, but not too old for light heavyweight. And how about this? He did lose to Nikita Krylov back in 2022 via decision, but since then has beaten Guskov in the first round and then Johnny Walker here inside the first round as well. He still has a ways to go potentially for a title shot, although you're never really that far from it at light heavyweight. He obviously previously fought Daniel Cormier for it and had to kind of regroup. And I think he left South Florida and is back in Europe now. But he looked great. Patiently, I don't call him no time, patiently set up, executed viciously, calmly. There's a couple times he took a big shot, but he didn't freak out about it. Put the pressure on Walker, made him back up, made him pay for his leaning back and his retreats, faked him out with the left hook, finished him off from there. Vicious KO to close the whole thing. He deserves a big opportunity. That was great from him. But we have to say a word about Johnny Walker. Whoa. Let's count them, shall we? How many times has this dude been absolutely fucking laid out in the octagon? So the Oezdemir fight, he got laid out. I think in the Ankalaev fight, he got laid out. Jamal Hill, he definitely got laid out. He got laid out in the Corey Anderson fight where he had that really awful fall the whole time. So we've got 4 fights. Anderson, Hill, Ankalaev, and Oezdemir. And that's 2 in a row where he's been finished either in the first or second round. Guys, I don't understand his game plan or what they've been working on with him in the gym at all. He'll fight with range, but without really ever throwing a whole lot to deter anyone or mix up his offense enough where it just feels like he kind of tries to like avoid being KO'd for 15 minutes by leaning out of the way. And guys get to slowly figure out how they get past what is usually a very minimal line of defense to get there. It's like, dude, if you're going to fight tall, there have to be something deterring them at range, not making them just wait until they can see what the exact opening is and then go. It's I can't understand the way he fights at all. At all. He's got a long jab. He doesn't really use it. Volkan Oezdemir had a good jab, by the way. He used it plenty. You saw it there, and I think he even had a reach disadvantage. You know, I understand using your kickboxing length and at that range to make someone pay, but you have to marry that with other things in other portions of the distance closing process, and there just doesn't appear to be that kind of a thing. Like, I don't know what they're doing with his game at SBG. I mean, I'm not there. Maybe they're trying and he's not listening. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but it's not working. It's not working at all. Guys basically collapse the pocket on him at this point now relatively easily. They back him up. He doesn't have the cage craft to get out of the way one direction or the other enough anyway, not much. He gets hit and then he gets confused and then he gets finished. Like, and dude, also some of these KOs have been really, as I mentioned, the four I just mentioned, God only knows what's happened in practice, have been really, really, really bad. How old is he? How old is Johnny Walker? Johnny Walker is 32. Dude, 32, taking that kind of damage, 2 subsequent back-to-back ones, not having the cage craft, not using the proper strike selection or other forms of tactical or strategic thinking to develop a game that's dangerous at range. His game is not really dangerous that way at range. I mean, it can be, but it's not. He gets consistently hunted down. He gets consistently. There's nothing deterring these guys, or very little deterring them, or intercepting them along the way. There's deterrence, interception, all of that. I just don't see it. I just see a tall guy leaning back and not putting enough in front, and then getting fucking crushed for it. He's what, 6'6"? He's listed as 82.5-inch reach. So I don't really know what the hell they've been doing. That's a weird one for me, and a really bad loss for Walker. Not the kind that like, oh, he can't get a fight against somebody reasonable with a big name in the division, but like, where is he going? I can't tell where his game is even at this point. And now you're coming off 2 back-to-back horrible, at least the last one, really bad KO. I think the last one before this one, the Uncle Live one, was bad too. I don't know, man. I don't know. Not looking that great. The rest of the card, not that awesome. Let's see. You had the Nasrat Haqparast Jared Gordon fight. That one was pretty good. Kind of thought Gordon had edged it. It's close. The big revelation of the undercard, Felipe Lima winning in one round at round number 3 at 115 round number 3 against Muhammad Naimov. He had that rear naked choke. Great performance from him. It's good English on that kid too, so he did a great job. Renat Fakretinov getting a split over Nicholas Dalby. Fakretinov, another one of these guys who seems good, but I don't know how good he is at this point. Gafarov kind of having a brain fart and then losing to Kyung Ho Kang in the end. No, he won. Excuse me. What am I saying? I'm thinking of a different fight. Sorry, wrong one. He wins via decision over Kyung Ho Kang. Magomed Gadzi Asulov gets a decision over Brenson Hibero, and then Chang Ho Lee in a really bad fight against Long Shao. I was at the gym when I saw that fight, and I couldn't believe how bad it was. Really bad. All right. If you have any questions, we'll get to them now. If not, we can close this whole thing. But let's see what you got, and then we'll talk about it here. All right. Well, thank you, Donegan. Appreciate it, bud. Matt says, I thought Rob would win, but good Lord, that was a win with an exclamation if ever I saw one. Guy had a point to prove, and he fucking proved it. He fucking proved it. Thomas says, thoughts on Whittaker versus Strickland in Perth? I think Perth is spelled with an E. Imagine a conference with Izzy, DDP, Whittaker, and Strickland. That's what you have. Dude, that's the middleweight. I'm telling you, Strickland is not nearly as offensively potent as the other 3 guys, right? even if you love Strickland, you cannot say he's as offensively potent as Whittaker, as Duplessis, as Izzy. Fine. But he is in that company. Obviously, he won the belt. He beat Izzy. I didn't think he beat DDP the first time I watched, but the second time I watched, I did think he beat DDP. So he is in that company. Dude, it's them four and then everybody else. That's it. It's Izzy, it's DDP, it's fucking Bobby Nux, and it's the crazy man Sean Strickland. Those are the middleweight dudes who are fucking awesome and or at a bare minimum hard to beat. Those guys. Those are the ones. Everybody else, it's a different division after that. So hard to go wrong with any of the matchmaking there. Good rematches, good storylines. Again, Strickland is not as offensively dynamic, not even close as the other three guys, but he makes it for he's an interesting component in those top four among those top four names. Fair claim, Volkov's kicks really helped him win. Yeah, I think so. Shit ton. We just saw the stats. Was it 38% kicks to the leg? I mean, that alone, his kicking game was more than that. We talked about holstering the right hand, right? Keeping him busy, but then landing going underneath the rib and then landing here. Like all that was great. All that was great. But it wasn't just that. He had a good jab as well. And at times, so he was moving not just to get out of the way of Pavlovich. It got to the point where Volkov was moving to pull Pavlovich into him and then fire the left and catch him, which he did as well. So, yes, Volkov's kicks were really, really, really important, but we got to give credit where credit is due. He was much more than that. Lazy says, Rob versus Sean, co-main for Perth under Izzy DDP. I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it. And I guess you could put those two winners together, right? You could do it. You 100% could do it. 1 billion% you could do it. And you'd get a great fight no matter what. Matt says, at this point, I genuinely feel like Walker needs to disappear for several months and work on his defense. Yeah. I honestly don't see him reaching the heights initially expected of him, but it's not just his defense. It's his offense too. That's the problem. It's bad knockouts, insufficient defense, and I mean, he was wild before, and that carries all kinds of problems, but he was at least, dangerous when he was wild. Now I feel like he's not even dangerous. His game has become like neuter. Dawood, which is, by the way, Arabic for David, says, just to play the devil's advocate, to what extent is it sports washing and not a new player breaking into an already established market that's difficult to get into without a lot of money? Because we know the Saudis are doing it on purpose. They're not really hiding it. But by the way, it's not just sports washing. To be clear about that, it's diplomacy, soft diplomacy. They want to change the economic nature of Saudi Arabia's broader economy. They want to change it to to what extent can we now make this a tourist destination, right? Rather than being solely reliant upon a natural resource. So it's partly that too. It's partly also giving people in Saudi Arabia entertainment options and raising the quality of life. So it's not just one thing, and we can all recognize that. But it's clearly designed, and they've been explicit that it's designed not so much with UFC or boxing, but the attempt is the same more generally, to make themselves look good by purchasing access to a world that doesn't care who they are, that will launder their image to make them look good for others. Again, I don't expect most people to care about this, and you can feel how you want to feel about it. I also think that we're just now in a place where if you live in the United States, trying to lecture every other country about the morality of what they should be doing in 2024 doesn't make a lot of sense. But we should also be clear, Saudi Arabia is a religious dictatorship. They throw people in jail for tweeting. They're using this and boxing and everybody else, and soccer and tennis, you name it. It's not just one. Racing, to make themselves look better after having become a bit of a near pariah state after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, which they ordered. Kaon says, does this do more for Rob than a forgettable 48-47 split against Hermanson or Allen? Yeah. UFC has shown they value hype in giving title shots. Yes. Okay, so to your point, if Rob had gotten, let's say, a 48-47 split against either Jack Hermanson or Brendan Allen, we would look at that and be like, okay, that's a really tough, credible win. Like, he keeps beating credible opponents. And not that Askarov is some scrub, but he's not on that level, certainly not yet. So the win doesn't mean the same as those wins in that way. However, the emphatic nature of it, while doing UFC a solid and really reminding like how dangerous Rob can be if someone is just even remotely, Rob Whittaker is not to be fucked with, and him sending a reminder like what he's capable of. Yeah, dude, people are always going to remember knockouts more than they are bad decisions, or not bad decisions, but like woeful fights with, close decisions. People are always going to remember knockouts more than that. Like, I'll just give you an example. Here's an easy way to think about this. When I do breakdowns on YouTube, right? Assuming the UFC doesn't take them, but if I can be serious, it's true in boxing too. You can take a really, really, really good fight, like a fucking awesome fight, and if it went to a decision versus another fight that wasn't nearly as good but had a vicious KO in it, the breakdown of the fight with the vicious KO, again, a categorically worse fight that meant less, it will do much better than a fight than a video that's about a good fight that was closely competitive but had a close decision. It's just the nature of human intrigue. It's the nature of human appreciation. So that's why it was a huge risk for Rob to take this, because it could have everything he was building could come crumbling down. And there's not a lot of ways to make it look good when you have that much of a lead on your opponent. But he found a way. He found the way. Go in there and fucking flatten them, run them over, make it look like they never even belonged in your orbit. Make it look like the UFC looked, I mean, they're not, but make it look like they were silly for even thinking Aliskerov could be there. That's what he did. It's so much more memorable. It's so much more invigorating to see Rob do violent, crazy shit and to be appreciative of it. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. The win doesn't by itself mean as much as a hard-fought win over Brendan Allen, but the value of it could be much higher. Dean says, switch to Bellator to see Countryman Hughes and love Jimmy and Dan on comms. Dream cross-promotion booth, yeah. Also, is it crazy to favor Rob versus Izzy III? No, I don't think so. Also, Bellator won't have their stuff on demand. So if you missed Bellator in the United States, unless you're willing to go to some pirated situation, you can't watch Bellator either. And I'm like, dude, who the fuck? I mean, okay, you can't control the calendar, so you book a date and, it happens to conflict with UFC, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about that. But you book a time that conflicts with UFC's on, which means no one's going to watch. I know Connor was at the Bellator show, which is good for them, but it still doesn't, it doesn't change anything. And then on top of it, Americans who decided to watch UFC and then want to get to this one later have no way of getting to it because there's no video on demand. You got to be fucking kidding me, man. Like, holy shit. Got to be a better way to do things than that, folks. Ryan says, thoughts on Sean versus Rob Comania? We kind of talked about that. Sean is loved in Australia, I bet. And Rob took no damage. Also true. Plus, if Izzy or DDP falls out, one of them can step in. Yeah, totally. 100%. Dude, a middleweight tournament with those four guys would fucking rock. Yes. Thanks, Luke. We love you, man. Cheering you on. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Fofo says, Kelvin Wynn put a bad taste in my mouth. Weight cheat. I felt bad for D-Rod. Yeah, I felt bad for him too. I've kind of had enough of this fucking game where you can force a guy to a 15-pound jump, win, and that's it. The only cost you have to pay is just, the administrative fee of it all up front. I'm kind of sick of it. Fuck you says, you're a matchmaker. Who are Bo Nichols' next three? I don't know about that. I would say Chris Curtis. Yeah, somewhere between Caio Borralho to Chris Curtis, somewhere in there. And then we'll see how that goes from there. Trocoli had the leg wrapped up, about to turn Bullet into open space. A submission victory was far from impossible. Disgraceful. I can't believe that he didn't take a point. I really respect Mark Goddard. I know he takes his craft seriously. I know he cares about doing the job right. No one can bat 100%. It's not possible. He struck out tonight. That was a really, really bad omission on his part. I fucking can't, dude. I cannot stand referees being like, I don't want to interfere. You're interfering by not enforcing the rules. You've already interfered by not enforcing the rules. Kill me. Please kill me. Alex says, the old Conor would have fought with that injury. I don't think he wants to fight anymore if he does come back. Is Chandler still the guy? So it's a great question. It's something I want to save for Monday. I don't really want to get to it on this broadcast. I do appreciate that you put something in the super chat, Alex, so thank you. I appreciate it very much. But I kind of want to table this conversation to a Conor one that we'll have on Monday, whether or not he would have fought with that injury and ultimately what that means. Tori says, Aspinall may have taken something from Pavlov, for real. It's possible. Certainly in the immediate sense. I mean, remember, it was a different thing. But remember the beating that Francis Ngannou took to Stipe in their first fight, and then he goes to France and has this whole crisis, comes back and fights Derek Lewis and looked shot. You guys remember that? He looked completely shot. Now, that's a much different thing. It was a much longer beating, blah, blah, blah. But, dude, you get knocked out like that, it can affect you for sure. So, something to pay attention to. Anthony says, you've had an Android phone for a long time. What ultimately made you switch to the iPhone? It honestly is as simple as this. The Android that I had, I think it was this like a Samsung Galaxy 22, whatever it was, the top of the line one for Samsung, and that one broke, and I went to go get a replacement, and the model I had like the one that has like 512 gigs or whatever. The one that I had, they couldn't replace it, and so the closest thing, they're like, well, you can have an iPhone, and my wife has an iPhone, and my dad has an iPhone. They've been kind of begging me to get on one so they can use FaceTime with it. So yeah, there we go. And then Tishk, or whoever you pronounce it, says Paige Van Zandt and Power Slap. Wow. That's sad. Okay. I think that is that, boys and girls. So thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Fun little show. We went for about an hour and 10 minutes. Monday's MK. Stick around for that, and lots of more fun stuff. We'll have a breakdown of this somewhere on this card on Monday as well. So love you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, hey, go out and have some fun. Don't drink and drive. Bye.